Good evening. I'm Amy McDonald, Director of CitySpace. Welcome to this virtual conversation between acclaimed chef and founder of the legendary Chez Panisse, Alice Waters, and our Curated Cuisine moderator, Sheryl Julian. They will be talking about Alice's career, her food philosophy, and her new book, We Are What We Eat, a Slow Food Manifesto. You can purchase a copy of the book from our bookstore partner, Brookline Booksmith, at the link in the description below this video. We will be taking your questions throughout the hour. Just type in your question in the slido.com at the right. Sheryl and Alice, take it away.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, Alice. I think it's actually your afternoon. You're in California. You in Berkeley? I'm in Boston.
I'm in Los Angeles.
You're in Los Angeles. I'm in Boston.
It's very hot out today.
And it's freezing here. I want to start with an explanation of what slow food is. I know you wrote an entire book on the subject, so I just want you to summarize the difference between slow food and fast food. Could you do that?
I will try to do that because that's definitely the subject of my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this country go from a slow food culture to a fast food culture. And I know that each of these cultures has a set of values. And when I think of slow food, I think of stewardship of the land. I think of nourishment. I think of equity. I think of the values that really form this democracy. And I have seen this country change in a very short period of time to a fast food culture. And I wondered why, which is why I wrote this book. How could this have happened? And when I went back to really think about it, it was in the 50s. And people had seen that kind of way we mobilized people during World War II to plant gardens and be part of the war effort. And they thought, well, you know, advertising. And they began to sell food in that way. They advertised it as being fast, cheap, and easy. And so my theory is when you eat fast food, you're digesting the values that come with it. So we understand that everything should be available 24/7, that more is better, that time is money. We understand that food should be fast, cheap, and easy. And it's never been fast, cheap, or easy.
When you talk about fast food, are you casting a wider net than fast food burger places and sandwich places?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I really consider fast food as food that's being produced by the industrial food system.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about how the food is grown. It's grown with herbicides and pesticides. I'm thinking about the people who work in the meat factories. I'm thinking about food coming from around the world. I'm thinking about food that has all of a sudden become the food in airports, in gas stations, in every place we stop.
Mm-hmm.
The food that's available in hotel rooms. And I'm thinking, how did this happen?
One of the things you write is that it's a myth that fast food is cheaper than organic food. And one of the examples that you give is that a meal for a family of 4 at KFC costs $30 for 12 pieces of chicken, 3 large sides, and 6 biscuits. And if you buy an organic chicken, you propose, which is expensive at $25, you can make 3 different meals out of it for 4 people. So tell me a couple of those meals. What is the first preparation that you're doing with the chicken, and then what are a couple of the meals that you're doing?
And I might just separate the breasts off and the legs, and use the carcass and the bones from the breast and the legs, and make a chicken stock out of that. I might decide that I'm going to just grill the breasts and serve it, with other vegetables. I don't consider that that half a breast is too little to be served. And I might just cook those legs in the chicken stock the next day, and I might make them into a chicken salad for lunch. I feel like I'm not up to all the ways that Jose Andres could use one chicken. He claims he can make 7 meals out of a chicken. And I can only make 3 or 4. But it has a lot to do with portion size.
Of course.
And I learned a lot about that when I went to France. My friend Martine used to buy one beautiful organic chicken. And I said, how can you serve 8 people? And I experienced a beautiful meal that she made with roasted eggplant, and wonderful rice, and she made a salad before. And I never, ever questioned the amount of meat that was on my plate. But this, again, is a message from the fast food industry. More is better, more on your plate, the happier you're going to be. But when we have an obesity epidemic, I'm just thinking that that's the last thing we need.
You write that one of the tenets of the slow food movement is beauty. You say beauty is the language of care. And I wanted to ask you about your French friend, Martine Labreau, and how she influenced you about the table and about the beauty of slow food and the whole slow food culture.
Well, she was very, very thrifty. And she came over to California right before I opened the restaurant. And I used to go to the flea market with her. And when I was thinking about everything we were going to need for the restaurant, she said, I'm going to help you find it at the flea market. It can be something that's used and something beautiful. And so we bought these mismatched chairs, which gave it a sense that you were in somebody's house. And in fact, it had been somebody's house before we became a restaurant. And so it had that nice feeling about eating in someone's home. And she loved that and kept talking about how even the glasses could be mismatched and the silverware. Why didn't we buy the used silverware at the flea market? But she found aprons for us. She found everything and was very used to shopping that way in France. They didn't have much money, but she made things. She was an artist and she knew how to make a room beautiful and always lit the candles before dinner.
So is it a little thing like lighting candles in a way that we can all bring beauty into our everyday lives?
Well, I really think so, because I mean, there are many ways to bring beauty in. And certainly one way is with the food that you've just purchased or just picked from a garden and putting that out on the table. But I always like the ritual of lighting the candle, bringing all my friends or family to the table and saying, this is a very important ritual of the day. Not saying it, but saying it with the way that you have set the table. And I'm not thinking of anything fancy, really. I'm just thinking of setting a table with a kind of sense of that moment in time.
Let's talk a little bit about seasonality. That is the tenets of slow food. There are people joining us from all over the country, but we, of course, are in the Northeast, a pretty frosty place through March and sometimes April, where there are many of us trying to eat locally, and the diet becomes pretty monotonous because there are lots of root vegetables and hearty greens and not much else. We have access to greenhouse lettuces lately and to greenhouse tomatoes from Maine. You're often asked by cold climate residents what they should do during a long winter. And what do you tell them?
Well, first of all, I grew up in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what cold winters are like.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what summer tomatoes and corn is like. And so I feel like I can speak to this pretty convincingly.
Mm-hmm.
My parents did have a victory garden during the war, and they kept it for their whole lives. They always had that garden. And I certainly remember eating strawberries in that garden when I was very, very little. And they had an apple tree, and they always canned the apples and had applesauce for the winter. But you really have to be prepared for the winter season. And I think that we have never quite been prepared as a nation around cooking, thinking ahead. I'm not sure why, but I think it really had to do with the fact that we were growing food for quantity rather than taste and diversity. I think it also had to do that we were Puritans who were landing there at the beginning and thought of the table as a little bit not a place to spend a long period of time or to have a conversation or to cook really tasty food. But I know from talking with chefs around the country and around the world that we have eaten delicious things in the cold seasons. And I look to Northern China, I look to the Middle East. I really know that we can do this. And there are so many beautiful varieties of beans, every color of the rainbow. And now we have carrots that way, 10 different colors of carrots. And we can store a lot of squash, winter squash. I think that's one of the vegetables that the students at Martin Luther King Middle School, where I've been working for the last 26 years, has proven to me that these students love beans and greens. They love hummus. They love kale. Who knew? Mm-hmm. But you can make, if you have a greenhouse, and you do need a greenhouse when you're in a cold climate, but there are all kinds of nuts and berries that can be dried. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fish that can be salted and kept. There's sauerkraut, there's all kinds of ways that we can cook differently in the winter than in the spring or summer or fall. And we have never put our minds to it because we've had this industrial food system importing food from around the world. So we can have avocados at Christmas. And we never had that. Maybe we had a date from California, or maybe we had a piece of citrus from Florida.
You know, I can't, excuse me for interrupting, I can't even tell you what the season is for avocados. I don't even know, because
nobody knows, but I do know.
What is it?
I live in California. It's sort of in the late spring. And they're around when the lemons are ripening, the citrus in California. And they last quite a little period of time then. But I have had such a different experience when you buy food in season. That's where the taste is. When I was looking for food that tasted like the food that I had eaten in France, I ended up at the doorsteps of the local organic farmers and the ranchers and fishermen. And so I knew that there was something absolutely about seasonality, but I think it's the most important thing that we do is to eat seasonally, because it brings you into a rhythm with nature.
How do you, if I don't know what season avocados are in, and I'm pretty clued up about seasonality, how do we educate the average consumer about what's in season and when?
Well, that's why I think it's so important to teach this in school. To teach the biodiversity of the planet, to know what people grow in cold places and how they go about doing that, how they dry foods, how they can foods for the winter. But there's so many grains that we don't know anything about, that we have the possibility of eating in the winter months. You know, all shapes and colors of noodles. And you know, there are yellow tomatoes that can be canned, and red ones, even green ones. But I always thought it was very hard to can until we learned about sort of making a confit of tomatoes, where you put them in olive oil and just cover the pan, maybe put garlic in there, some basil, and just cook them slowly until they fall apart. And then I take off the skins and I put them in a jar, and I keep them for the winter, or I put them in the freezer. But I love having that scent, remembering summer in the middle of the winter and feeling like I really did that myself when the tomatoes were dead ripe and really affordable.
So you've had some interesting wait staff jobs since your girlhood. One of them was that you worked as a car hop at the Country Cousin in Michigan City, Indiana, when your family lived there, and you delivered fried chicken on roller skates.
I did do that.
Anything else in your waitstaff repertoire?
Well, I also worked at a hot dog stand.
Winsky and Winsky.
Winsky and Winsky Enterprises.
Okay, sorry.
And that was very short-lived, but two friends of mine had this little hot dog stand, and they wanted me to help there. And I did that for a little while. But I also worked in a big department store in California, in Los Angeles, actually.
Bullets.
Yeah, Bullocks.
Mhm.
And the woman who ran that was a perfectionist.
Mhm.
And I learned how to cook crab. And it had to be a live crab. And you had to crack that crab. And she made the bread. And it was, really homemade bread, made the mayonnaise. And we had to make that crab sandwich just so. And I understood because it tasted so good.
You also worked in a pub in London when you were studying at Montessori.
I did, but that was a more difficult job. But I learned one thing that I'll never forget, that if you polish the glasses every day, they're always clean. And it's that everyday activity of cleaning the restaurant, the pub, that was very meaningful to me. I thought it was a waste of time, but those daily tasks just become part of your preparation for the guests.
You write that another important aspect of slow food is a work culture that brings some pleasure, and you tell a story. We told many delightful stories, but one of them is about a factory of Cuban cigar rollers that you heard about.
Well, my friend Davia Nelson, who does a program on NPR called The Kitchen Sisters, she did a story about the cigar rollers down in Cuba. And she said that when they were doing that, what seemed was a monotonous task, that they decided, all of the workers, that they wanted somebody to read to them while they were rolling the cigars. And I just thought, what a great idea. And they put their money together and they had people try out, and they asked them to read books like War and Peace or poetry. And it changed the way that they worked and educated them and delighted them. And I thought to myself, every job should be thought of in terms of what you're asking someone to do. And maybe it's bringing music into the room. Maybe it's having good windows and light so that you can see the outside. But the way that our factories are designed and our kitchens are very often put down in the basement and along with the garbage. And I want to say that having no back of the house, if you will, it has been the most gratifying sort of innovation that we did at Chez Panisse. We wanted both a place for everybody to eat sitting down, but we wanted to have nice tiles on the walls of the dishwashing area. We wanted to have windows so people could see out. And it's very, very important for the spirit of the whole.
And on the question of being a waiter, waitress, which you were, one of the participants wants to know what you think of the tipless system right now, in which the staff in the, there's a built-in amount, and some goes to the staff in the kitchen and some goes to the staff in the dining room.
I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Until we really can pay wages, living wages to every person, we need to have those tips coming in. Mm-hmm. And we have to really think that every job is important. Every job in the restaurant. If we didn't have a dishwasher, we couldn't run the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to value all the jobs. And one thing that we've been trying to do is have people do those jobs, whether they're a cook in the kitchen or a waiter in the dining room or a busser or a host, that we put ourselves in those other positions and we learn about how important they are and how difficult they are. Mm-hmm. So it's unfortunate that we have been, again, indoctrinated with that tip system that goes way back into the history, mm-hmm. plantation history. But we need to stop that tipping. I've been in a situation, I hate to admit it, where I didn't get paid, really. And you had to really sell yourself in a way to the customers. And I felt like I deserved to take home some of the silverware from the restaurant because I wasn't paid enough to buy silverware for my apartment. And that's a really very, very, what do I want to say? For an owner of a restaurant to just not give a living wage to every employee is unconscionable.
Mm-hmm. And undoubtedly the reason why restaurants now are suffering from lack of cooks. One of the reasons. The idea for the edible schoolyard began when you visited a prison garden you'd agreed to buy vegetables from. What was that prison program? And that was a program that you visited long before you started the edible schoolhouse.
Yes. It was a program called the Garden Project at the San Francisco County Jail in San Bruno. And it was started by a woman named Catherine Sneed. And she was a therapist, but she got this lung disease and she couldn't work inside. And so she thought, well, maybe I could give therapy outside and maybe we could make a garden and we could try gardening. And she learned about permaculture in England and she got the okay from the sheriff's department and she started a 7-acre garden on the jail property. And she called me up one day and she said, I have vegetables, would you buy them from us so we could support the project? And I said, absolutely. And she said, well, you'll have to come and see my students, meet them. And I said, oh, please, I don't want to go to the jail. But I'm so glad I did, because she gathered them all together out in that garden. The sunflowers were about 10 feet tall. And she said, tell Alice about your experience here. And one kid raised his hand. He was probably 19. And he said, I shouldn't be speaking up at all. It's my first day in the garden, but it's the first day of my life. And I never knew that gardening could be transformational. And that's what I learned from that project, because everyone who left ended up getting a job, whether it was, working in the Tree Corps in San Francisco. They had a kind of halfway house garden that grew vegetables that they sold at the jail. At the farmer's market. And I just thought, why isn't there a garden project in every school? If you can do it in a jail, you can do it in a school. That it is, and that's when I started the Edible Schoolyard. I didn't have the idea originally. It really came from an enlightened principal, Neil Smith, who just called me up and he said, I want to beautify my school and you have something to do with gardens. Would you come over? And I went over there, and this school I had passed many times, and I almost thought it was abandoned. It had a chain link fence around, the graffiti on the walls. And I thought, I really couldn't imagine kids there. And he took me around. The school was built for 500 kids in 1921 on 17 acres of land. But since then, the students, there are 1,000 students now. They speak 22 languages at home. And most of the land was taken by the city to make a track and a playground. But there was an area that was just kind of abandoned after the portable buildings were taken off. And I just said, oh, a garden there. Mm-hmm. But not just a garden classroom. We weren't thinking of teaching gardening. We wanted to teach all the academic subjects. And I had my Montessori training welling up, saying learning by doing is the best way to teach. And the education of the senses is the best way to bring information into your mind. Through tasting and touching and looking carefully and listening and smelling. And so we set up, again, a kitchen in one of the bungalows, classroom, but not for teaching cooking per se, but for teaching all of the academic subjects. So when you were learning the history of the Middle East, there you were making your pita bread and your tabbouleh salad. And maybe it's a language class and you're making tortilla soup and speaking, Spanish. So this has been the most amazing project over 26 years, because it's proven to me that when they grow it and they cook it, they all eat it. And it's also proven to me that all the academic subjects can be learned at the same time they are cooking and gardening. And any subject can, but the values of stewardship and community and equity and beauty and nourishment are absolutely being absorbed osmosis. So when they graduate from 8th grade, they will become environmentalists. They know what regenerative organic agriculture is. They want to sit at the table with their friends. They want to communicate in that way. They will always know how to feed themselves. And so that is my great hope.
You wrote that the kitchen that you built at that original school was so appealing to the kids that they would come after school and do their homework there.
That's true. That's really true.
Mm-hmm.
They would come and they would see that bouquet of flowers on the table that the cooking school teacher, Esther Cook, put there, just to show them that they were loved, that they were cared about. And we always say at the edible schoolyard that beauty is a language of care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that they just know that that room is beautiful because it's been made that way, so that they will fall in love with learning. And that was so important in Montessori's pedagogy,
Mm-hmm.
was beauty and care of all of the things that were in the room.
Mm-hmm.
How you polish the tables, how you take care of things that are broken, you sharpen those pencils, you have a beautiful box. It was all of that that really impressed me when I took the Montessori training in London. But living in this sort of fast food culture, this way of learning has become the most important way to communicate with children
Mm-hmm.
of all ages.
You said that when you opened Chez Panisse in 1971, which is just an extraordinary run, no one in your group had been professionally trained, so you just cooked the way you cooked at home. And James Beard came and he said it was like having a meal in someone's home. You had no machines, and even today you write you wash lettuces by hand and dry them in towels. How do you make any money?
Now, we never set out to make money. That wasn't the goal, ever. I wanted to have some place to eat with my friends. I wanted something that tasted good. I wanted to win people over, which is a very slow food idea. I wanted them to taste something they never tasted, experience something that would wake them up. And so I was very lucky that my parents had given me the money to buy the building. And back then, I was lucky that it only cost $28,000
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have that big rent to pay. And that kept us alive until we really, had a great clientele that was constant. And that's what's important, is really the way the food tastes. And I have never worried about the restaurant unless the food was not great.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time. But we have had enough business to pay people
Mm-hmm.
a good salary, and we have lots of benefits. And one of the most important things I think I've ever done was to divide the main chef job into two.
Mm-hmm.
So they worked 3 days a week, but they got paid for 5.
Hmm.
And so each chef of the main chefs was
Mm-hmm.
able to have time with the family. They had time to work on menus, to go and to eat in other restaurants. And they had energy, and it really changed the way the restaurant operated. And it gave everybody who worked there, especially in the kitchen, 2 points of view at least. You would have 2 ways of doing it from the cafe chefs, 2 in the pastry and 2 in the downstairs restaurant. And so anybody who came in as an intern was very well how should we say, inspired.
Mm-hmm. So you opened the restaurant. Your parents mortgaged their house to allow you to do that. They had had Victory Gardens their whole lives, and you asked them to find a farmer you could buy vegetables from. And you write that your father was compulsively tidy about his garden, but he chose someone whose garden was not orderly. So tell us about that farmer and the arrangement that you made with him, which I think is to this day.
Oh, yes, he is our main farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and his name is Bob Kennard.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's now the Kennard family farm because his son Ross has taken over the gardening
Mm-hmm.
as Bob has graduated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, it was a regenerative garden way back before that word really meant something to all of us. And it means that Bob believed in having the soil be all that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't till the soil. He allowed all of those weeds, shall we say, all of that to just grow, and the bugs and the worms and all that make the carrot healthy. And he always said, my carrots are 20% more nutritious than anybody else's. And in fact, they were.
Mm-hmm.
He had them tested, but he had this garden that wasn't in, straight lines and tilled and all of that. And he grew things in areas by the river that grew well, like watercress, and under the trees. He really learned about what his culture, it's the diversity of plants that really grow in that part of Sonoma. And he counted on all our scraps from Chez Panisse. He turned into a compost that he put on the soil.
So they go back to him.
They all went back, and he used to complain when there was an errant piece of silverware or a napkin in the compost, but he really wanted everything. And he helped us learn how to even use some of his, weeds like purslane and nettles. We make a nettle pizza now that everybody wants to try because, of course, the sting comes out of the nettles when they're cooked, and garlic and the olive oil make them so tasty and so nutritious.
So, sorry for interrupting. A reader wants to know, you've opened a second restaurant, Lulu, at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. And a reader wants to know if you have plans to open any others.
Not right.
Sorry, not a reader, a listener. I beg your pardon.
I don't. And the reason that I wanted to do this restaurant at the Hammer Museum is because it's owned by UCLA. And I wanted to be in the UC system. I wanted students came from UC Berkeley and worked at Chez Panisse. I wanted to teach the students about regenerative agriculture and all of that. And I also have a dream for the University of California that they will really decide that they want to procure all of the food locally and organically. And I know that Janet Napolitano, when she was president, had a carbon neutrality initiative for 2025. And I asked her whether food could be part of that. And she said, I don't see why not.
Mhm.
And food needs to be considered part of the way we pull the carbon down into the ground where it belongs. And it's something that we can do right away for climate change. And it's a way that to build the economy of the state. This
Mhm.
could happen really in any state of this
Mhm.
country, especially if we decided to use the public schools to buy the food
Mhm.
locally and organically.
Mhm.
And I know all of the questions that people ask about this. And I believe that they are not true. It's not more expensive. It's not impossible. It is a way to connect with the seasons, with the people who grow your food. They're the most wonderful people who take care of the land, who take care of their farm workers.
Mhm.
I mean, it's been a gift over 50 years to meet the people that grow the food for Chez Panisse, because we would not be able to do what we do if we didn't have them. They are really the people that we count on.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that those people, and we want to express that. So it's like community supported agriculture.
Mhm.
It's restaurant supported agriculture,
Right.
or it could be school supported agriculture, where the people are so valuable, whether they're making tortillas organically or whether they're, whatever, making olive oil. It's so important that the schools buy from the people who care about humanity, care about the planet, care about each other
Our children too.
and our children. That's the most important part. We have to teach those values
Mhm.
of our democracy to the next generation. And what a delicious solution this is.
Mhm.
And an absolute way to address climate.
Alice, if you were 27 today, knowing now what you do, would you open Chez Panisse?
I might. Just walking around in Lulu restaurant, it's in the courtyard of the Hammer.
Mhm.
I have two good friends who are David Tanis cooking in the kitchen, and Jessie McBride, who I've known for many years, who's running the dining room. And I just love meeting people. I love that little fixed menu we do for lunch. And I feel so, I don't know, alive. I guess that's
Mhm.
being able to give food to people that they love or that they have questions about, to talk about it. And of course, I wanted to connect the dots between beauty and art. And of course, the university and education. So that's the intersection right there at the Hammer Museum.
Mhm.
And I feel so lucky to be, connected in that way. And, it is almost like you're starting a restaurant again, or you're being in that world in a different way.
Mhm. During the last fall days in Berkeley, you write that you set a big vase of sunflowers on your table. Tell us about this ritual of saying goodbye to this.
During the reopening,
No, at the end of fall, when you set a big bouquet of sunflowers on your table to say goodbye to the season.
yes, that's exactly what I do. And I know it's just the end. I feel so grateful to have had them, but when they're over, they're over. And you know, in a way, it's the strict seasonality that we practice at Chez Panisse that allowed us to have these changes happen during a time when it was very difficult to change anything. We were making food to go. We had to put it in a box in a certain way, but we made salads with persimmons. And when they disappeared, in come the pears. And we made salads with pears and with the chicory lettuces and all the colors. And I just found that beauty revitalized me. Food can do that. And I dug up my front lawn and planted a victory garden because I was afraid I wouldn't have enough salad, if you can imagine. And that victory garden inspired other people in the neighborhood. And I became friends with the people across the street. They said they were planting a big one in their backyard.
Oh, that's very nice.
And it was. And I thought of my guerrilla gardener friend, Ron Finley, who planted in that space between the sidewalk and the street, the parkway.
Yes.
And he was cited for doing that in LA, but he won his case that he could plant food. And so I planted leeks.
More lettuces?
And lots of cilantro, but it turned out the deer liked my cilantro.
Oh, yes. The bunnies like my parsley.
But it's always important to learn what can be planted where.
So another question from a listener, what sorts of things do you do to give the community access to your restaurant? Well, I know Lulu is open to the public. They're both open to the public.
Open to the public. I feel like it's very affordable. And when we started the cafe upstairs, it was a place where you didn't have to have a reservation, and you would be open from 11 in the morning until 11 at night. And so people could come for a late night pizza and salad and a glass of wine. It's always been that way. But my really focus has been really on the schools right now and public education. And that is what I really want, a free and deeply nutritious school lunch for every child in this country.
And how many edible projects are there in the country?
Well, this is the most astonishing fact because we built a network about year 5 of the Edible Schoolyard Project. And we also have trainings that happen in the summer in an academy. So we were teaching people in the school, the exact place where we have the classrooms. And we also started schools around the country in different climates and different size cities so that we could have a proof of concept. And we started one in LA, one in New Orleans, one in North Carolina, Brooklyn, and upstate New York. And thank God they proved the concept. But we built the network, and there are over 6,500 schools around the world that are part of the network. And I don't know what they're doing. They're in every state of the United States. But I know that they believe in stewardship of the land, in organic food, in equity, in beauty, in learning by doing. Absolutely learning by doing. And I wish I could go and visit all 6,500, but they are there that anybody can investigate. They can see the age group that's being taught. But it means that we were able to scale this idea without any money involved.
Mhm.
except putting that website out into the world.
Mhm.
And I feel like, especially during the pandemic, we were able to share, cooking classes and gardening classes for people that they shared with their kids.
Mhm. Speaking of sharing, do you see any lasting favorable impacts from the pandemic on families?
Well, I think we have learned a lot of things. We haven't learned enough about the industrial food system, but we've seen it in action, killing animals rather than feeding people.
Mhm.
But and the immigrants working, being able to come across the border.
Mhm.
The conditions during COVID were unacceptable, and we've really wondered about how much people are being paid. And for me, the silver lining is the desire that many people have to cook,
Mhm.
to learn how to cook.
Mhm.
I've really found that that's true. And also the sharing of information among chefs around the world
Mhm.
has been so beautiful. I mean, I can't tell you about the camaraderie. And I'm not just talking about high-end restaurants. All restaurateurs are ready to share whatever they've learned
Mhm.
and the best things that people have loved to eat, and all of those ideas are coming from our network.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're not trying to hold the the secrets of the restaurant business for ourselves. No.
It's lovely camaraderie.
Mhm.
Another question from the audience: what do you suggest a couple who are very busy and coming home from work late make? I'm going to add a little bit to that and say, what should they make from the pantry?
Well, I always have a pot of beans that I make on Sunday. I make a pot of beans that I keep all week. And 1 week it may be, red beans and black beans. Maybe it's white beans and pink beans, but there's so many different colors available. But I make a pot of beans, so I have that. And I can reheat that in a minute. And I can add garlic, or I can add different herbs to that. I think something that's really great is to have cornmeal, to make cornbread. That's something that I love with beans. And I cook it with greens. Now, I can make greens ahead of time too. I don't usually have those in my pantry, but they're so easy, and the winter greens are so delicious. I mean, I eat them from really all year long. If I wanted to, I would have a stack of organic corn tortillas. And that's something I have for breakfast in a minute. I just put it on the stove and fill it with some greens and eat it. It's a breakfast in 3 minutes. I love having, farro pasta. There's so many shapes and kinds of pasta right now. I have that in my pantry. And I might have those tomatoes there too. And that's a very quick pasta. But I always go to the farmer's market on Saturday or Sunday, and I buy fresh lettuce always. Always. And it changes during the course of the year. Sometimes it's chicory, and sometimes it's little gems, and sometimes it's, rocket. And I just mix things together, but I love a salad.
Mhm. I regret to say that we're run out of time, because I think that we could talk for a long time and listen to you for a very long time. I've really enjoyed this, Alice. I want to say thank you for everything you've done for the restaurant industry, the food industry, the way we live, the way we eat. I know that there are thousands and thousands of people who deeply appreciate what you've done. So thank you for this wonderful conversation, and thank you to our audience for their questions. And our next Curated Cuisine is on May 17 with the Korean vegan chef Joanne Lee Molinaro. Tickets are at WBUR.org/events. And thank you again, Alice. Can
I say one thing?
Please.
I'm hoping our new vice president and the wife of Biden want to make a garden on the front lawn of the White House. That's what I hope.
Okay. Have you written to them to ask?
Pardon me? I'm going to ask.
Okay. Okay. Well, you'll let us know.
I will.
Yes.
I will, because that's a place to express the values. And Michelle Obama, that picture of her with the children at the garden, it went around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But if they put it on the front lawn,
Mm-hmm.
the Bidens did that.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a message out to the world again.
Mm-hmm.
That we care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Wonderful idea, and thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.